Welcome to the Spa Girls podcast, the self-publishing podcast for authors. You're in the right place for the best writing, marketing, and publishing advice, plus interviews with industry experts and best-selling authors. I'm Cheryl Phipps.
I'm Shar Barrett.
And I'm Trudi J. Welcome.
Welcome back.
And we have with us today a very special guest that I'm super excited about, Angela Ackerman. And she's
Angela.
Hey, Angela.
Hi, Angela.
Guys. We've been waiting for this a long time.
Oh, goodness. Well, I'm honored.
And if you don't know who Angela is, she is the author of a range of Thesauruses, along with Becca Puglisi, and I have almost every single one of them. I've just discovered there's one I don't have. There's 10 of them, and I have 9 of them. And if you look watching on YouTube, I'm holding up one of them. And they're awesome. They really help me when I'm writing, and I know so many other authors who swear by them. So thank you, Angela, for being awesome.
Thank you.
You're just like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself
into? No. You guys are just like making me feel so good. It's like, I sort of just need you in my corner. Like every time I'm getting down, I'm just like, hey guys.
Yeah. We're here. Yeah. I'm quite happy to build you back up. So I'll just read out your bio and then we'll get into the questions. So Angela Ackerman is the author of 10 best-selling resource books printed in 9 different languages and enjoys sharing her passion for writing craft. She is a story coach, international speaker, and a firm believer that writers succeed best together. The desire to help writers in new, innovative ways led to One Stop for Writers, a unique site that contains game-changing tools and resources that enable writers to craft powerful fiction. Awesome, thank you. So, where did it begin? Like, I'm just curious, what led you down the path to creating the Thesauruses? Like, it's a unique idea. I'd love to know where it came from and how you got there.
Well, it's kind of interesting because this was completely unintended career path that Becca and I went on. Her and I met many years ago when we were both writing children's fiction. We found each other on online critique platform called the Critique Circle because we both knew that like we had some really good ideas and that, you know, our writing was pretty good, but it wasn't quite where it needed to be publishable. So, you know, we met on there, we went through the critique process, we kind of found each other's writing, and we just kind of fell in love with what each other was writing. And as we were kind of growing and developing our craft, we kept hitting this wall where we felt like our inability to describe our characters' emotions in a way that was fresh was really holding our writing back and holding our stories back, because our characters kept doing the same things. They kept like shrugging their shoulders and frowning and smiling and doing these things over and over and over. And it's like, oh my gosh, like there's gotta be a better way to think like of fresh ways to describe different emotions and familiar. To describe so many different ones, right? This is like the universal problem. But at that point in time, we didn't quite realize how universal it was. So Becca and I started creating lists. We would take an emotion and we would think, okay, what are all the things that a character how would they show this through their body language, through their actions, through dialogue cues, through those internal visceral sensations that are inside the body that you have no control over. And we would look at all that kind of stuff through thoughts. Because each emotion, your character thinks a certain way, they behave a certain way, certain things happen within the body. And so we started creating these lists for each emotion to kind of help us brainstorm. And we started sharing these lists. And eventually we started a blog around these lists because we could see like within this online community, lots of people were like, oh my gosh, this is really helpful because now I know how to describe fear other than my character shivering and their teeth chattering and their heart pounding a million miles a minute. So they were able to think beyond those first few ideas. So we built a blog around this idea. We started creating these lists, doing more and more emotions. People would contact us and say, can you do confusion or can you do guilt? Or, you know, they would request certain things. And the blog just became very popular very fast. And that's where we started to see this really is like a universal problem. And this kind of led us to a deep dive into show don't tell, which is something that we hear all the time as writers, but I think we don't truly appreciate how deeply it filters through everything we do. And so we started tackling other topics beyond emotion. We did setting, we did personality traits, emotional wounds, all different kinds of different topics where we really need to understand them at depth and be able to show them on the page in order for our fiction to come alive.
Yeah.
Now, at this point in time, somebody really liked the idea of the Emotion Thesaurus, and they scraped all our content and they started distributing it.
Oh,
And
wow.
how we found
my
out,
goodness.
I know.
Ugh.
How we found out is somebody
Typical.
contacted us in Florida and they asked us to come teach a workshop on the Emotion Thesaurus, and we're like, the Emotion Thesaurus? Yeah, I've got it right here with me. It's a PDF. We're like, what?
Yeah.
So that was kind of the moment where we realized, okay, we need to do something with this or other people will. And so that kind of started the path to producing books, first the Emotion Thesaurus, and then turning these other thesauruses into books as well.
Mm.
So yeah, it was kind of a
Wow.
weird journey.
Yeah. Oh my
And
gosh, I'm so
did it
glad.
affect your own writing? It must have,
Sorry?
surely. Did it affect your own writing?
Yes. I mean, at the start, it made us stronger writers because we were able to apply the things that we were learning and the brainstorming, like all of that went into our own writing, and we saw like incredible growth. But at a certain point in time, I mean, our books and managing this website, which was just getting bigger and bigger, it became the point in time where in order for us to do that well, we had to set our fiction aside. And so that's the decision that we made. I know for me, I can't speak for Becca. For me, I feel like it's still something that I want to do, and I am hoping to get my way back there. You know, I need to like clear my plate a little bit so that I can have the time to do that, because I really would like to see, you know, how much has my writing changed. I don't even know if I would write the same genre or the same stuff. I almost think that I would have to write something completely different in order to get out of my own way, because I think I would like, I don't know, I think I feel a lot of pressure on myself if I went to the genre that I knew, and maybe a new genre because it's new, it might be less pressure on me. I don't know. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I want to get back to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So hard when you've become so successful with the thesauruses, and you know, to kind of switch backwards and forwards. It's a big deal, isn't it?
It's like the business management part of everything. It's a lot. And One Stop for Writers is like, again, its own entity. It's a tech company. It's, you know, it's a lot of stuff going on there too. But I think, you know, at our heart, what really motivates Becca and I is we love to help people. And so we love to help people through these books or through software or however we can do it. You know, that's just what really motivates us. And it's always been the thing that kind of joins us, is that we have this shared belief that, you know, writers, when we help each other, you know, that's where we all succeed together, and we love that.
Yeah. We think the same, definitely.
I think that touches us, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
We get
So-
that feeling too.
Which one was first?
The first one was the Emotion Thesaurus. Oh, actually, hold on, I have it here. So this is
snap.
if you're watching here, this is the first
little one.
edition, and then what you have is the second edition.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why we created a second edition is this was our first book. We self-published it. You know, you don't know what you're doing in the first book, and it's we realized, you know what, there's a lot of more emotions that we could cover. We wanted to go back and like add more content to all those different emotions. We had learned a lot by the time we did the second edition, and so it's like, it's almost twice as big as the first one. The first one is 75 emotions, and then the second one is 130. So, you know,
I
Wow.
like the size as well. Like it's a little bit bigger, and you can kind of open the pages out, and there's I don't know. I think I'm looking at your smaller version, and I think I like the bigger size.
Yeah. That first one, like we didn't, like I said, this was 2012 when that first one was published. So it was also at the start of kind of when things were ramping up with self-publishing.
Yeah.
There was still a lot of stigma in the industry.
Yeah.
Becca and I were putting a book out in the very same area where there was a lot of, you know, animosity. Well, not animosity, but there wasn't a lot of acceptance for self-publishing. There was a lot of judgment. And so it took a lot of, you know, kind of talking ourselves like, okay, we can do this, because we were putting our book on the same bookshelf as books that were dominated by the traditional industry. So it, you know, we had a lot of imposter syndrome at that point in time to do that. So yeah, I mean, that was another reason why we wanted to redo it and just make the print size a little bit smaller, make it look nicer, really fill it out with more information that we had learned in the, since the first book to the second, you learn more about emotion. And we just wanted to redo it. So I'm glad self-publishing allowed us to do that. It was great.
Yeah,
that's the awesome
absolutely.
thing, isn't it? So I just wanted to go through, because I think if someone's listening to us talk about it or watching the YouTube, they're not really gonna, like you say, oh, it's a thesaurus. You go, oh, well, I've got one of them on my desk already. I don't need any more, kind of thing. We all kind of have this idea of what a thesaurus is, but this is something more. I feel like the word thesaurus doesn't accurately describe how helpful and awesome these books are. So I just thought maybe if we could kind of go through, like for me, I'm like, okay, I've got the book open. It's sitting on embarrassment. And it says there's a definition of what embarrassment is. And then there's a big, massive list of the physical signs and behaviors. So if I'm writing, I don't have to just worry about making it a flush across my cheeks, which is the top one. But there's also, there's a whole big, massive list. But then there's also internal sensations, and then there's mental responses. So it's not just, and then it's acute or long-term responses for this emotion. So like the things that are longer term, signs that this emotion is being suppressed. So there's not just one,
it's not
like
just a definition.
There is so much here that you can use, and it may escalate too. So you might become embarrassed, but then you could become humiliated. There's all these things that are going to help me as an author just become more powerful. Even the verbs, associated power verbs, like that's just awesome. So you guys have gone through, and for every single emotion you've created all of this, which is amazing. I'm sorry, that was my rant over now.
It's a good rant, and it's also a trigger for writing too, so you can use it to kind of recover information for yourself like that to use, but it's also, if you're stuck, I think it's a great prompt as well. So
the other one,
and that's kind of the purpose of that one too, because it's really a brainstorming list. And you mentioned the format earlier, like we've tried to do this with all of our books, where it's on a 2-page spread. So you can see everything all at once, and you can think about your character, and you can think about the situation that they're in, that they're experiencing this emotion. And so what is it that they're thinking in this moment? What is it that they're feeling? What are they going to do? And so you can kind of read through those lists, and that's the thing. I can see them in my mind doing that. That's what I want to use. So it kind of triggers those ideas so that we don't get stuck. How am I going to show this?
And it's that getting stuck, isn't it? It's like, oh, well, I've never felt this particular emotion this strongly. What would I, just, I don't know, just helping to trigger and understand what might occur when someone feels this. It's just it's awesome. The other one, no, I have this, and I have to admit I haven't used it that often, but I do love it also. And it's the urban, there's rural setting, but this is the urban setting one. And it's like, again, let's open the page and talk about what's in here, because I can't help myself. So, okay, I'm going to try and find one that's, morgue. So for example, there's a whole bunch of different settings. There's like a parade or indoor shooting range or casino, art gallery, pet store. So there's the morgue, and it starts off with sites, which is all the things that you might see in a morgue, and there's a big list of anything. So if you're trying to write a scene in the morgue and you've never been in a morgue, you go, oh look, I might find goggles or hairnets or a shelf, like just all these different things, little suggestions. And then it's the sounds. So if we're going to use all of our senses, there's sounds, smells, tastes, textures, and sensations, all of which I'm kind of like, wow, as a writer, I'm going to be able to use this to kind of extend and expand what I've already written to make it a bit more real for the reader. And then it's got possible sources of conflict and the people commonly found here, so who might be there, the coroners, family members, forensic technicians. I was thinking it was going to say dead body, but it doesn't, because I guess they're not a person anymore. Related settings that may tie in. Setting notes and tips, and setting description examples. So all of that, and like you say, it's on that double-page spread, which again I hadn't noticed, I hadn't thought about, but is very, very smart. Like you say, I actually think that was a very, very smart thing to do like that. So I don't know, just awesome.
Yeah,
thank you. Well, the whole idea when we write is that we're trying to pull readers into those moments and make them feel like they're part of those moments. And I think with setting, we tend to think about what is the character seeing, and we write what is seen.
Mm.
But it is those other details, those smells, those tastes, those textures, those sounds. Those are really important in the real world. And when we bring some of those into that moment, it helps readers feel anchored in that scene. And certain things, smells are really tied to memory. So if you really want to make a reader feel part of that moment, try to weave in a smell that is tied to that scene, because it will help them remember a time where they smelled that, like baked bread. I mean, as soon as I say baked bread, you can just imagine, or freshly cut grass. Like there's certain smells that just trigger a memory for readers. So understanding kind of like the psychology behind why we're describing the things that we're describing in order to create this experience for readers is really important.
Yeah. And that allows us to do it with much more ease if we pick up our. So the other one that I love, and I definitely use all the time, every time I'm plotting a book, is the emotional wound. Is it emotional? Yeah, emotional wound thesaurus. And this one, so I want to go a bit more in depth in terms of the emotional wound. Unless there's any of the other books that you want to particularly mention, a favorite. Which one's your favorite?
Oh, it's such a big question.
It's like talking about your children, isn't it?
I think you guys should answer that, not me.
Well, mine is
They're right there. They're listening.
Yeah, exactly.
I love them all.
I love you all. It's fine.
All the same.
So can you talk about what the emotional wound is and why it's important, why you created an entire thesaurus on it?
Yeah. Understanding who our characters really are at their core will help us understand how they're going to behave in the story, the things that they're going to do, the decisions they make, how their relationships go, how they behave in relationships, how are they going to try to achieve certain goals. All of these things we need to know about our character. And in order for us to build a character, we have to dive into who they are when they arrive at the doorstep of our story. And if you think about us as people, each one of us, we're different. We've had certain experiences that have made us who we are. We were raised a certain way. We had a certain type of family, certain type of experiences. We lived in different areas and things like that. And the people and the things that happen to us in our lives help us become who we are. And of all the things that can happen us in our lives, one of the things that can shape us the most are those negative experiences, those difficult, painful moments where, we learn those painful life lessons. And we refer to these as emotional wounds. And so because we want to build characters that feel like they could have walked right out of the real world, we need to think about them as people. And we need to think about, okay, what made this character who they are? Why do they behave this way? Why do they think this way? And so to do that, we want to explore their past. We want to think about, who they really are and what are their belief systems and how were they raised. And this means that we do need to think about what painful past events have they experienced that make them who they are now. And who they are now is the person that sees the world in a certain way, that maybe sees themselves in a certain way, in a way that's negative. They may have lower self-esteem, or they may blame themselves for certain things. They may have certain fears in life, and those fears hold them back in some way. They keep them from being happy. They keep them from being successful, keep them from getting the things that they want in life. And all of the fear, this big pocket of fear, will be tied to those negative things that have happened to our characters. So thinking about, what causes fear, what causes us to worry about certain things. This is really important in storytelling, to understand who our character is and how they'll behave, because every character needs something in a story. There is something missing from their life at the start of the story, and we call this an unmet need. This is like Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, if you're familiar with that. Looking at the different types of needs: physiological needs, love and belonging, safety and security, esteem and recognition, and self-actualization. These are all human needs that, when they're missing, we feel like we have a hole inside of us, and we need to do something about it, because we're just going to become increasingly unhappy, increasingly unfulfilled. And we're going to feel like a yearning for something better. And so for our characters, it's the same thing. They want something better. There's something missing from their lives. And along comes a goal in the story that's going to fill that need. So it prompts them to look at themselves and go, okay, why can't I get that goal right now? Because whatever the goal is that's going to satisfy that unmet need caused by the fear of their emotional wound, it's going to be really hard to overcome that fear. If every goal was easy, our characters would get it in the first 5 pages. So we want to choose a goal that's particularly difficult for our characters for a specific reason. And that's why understanding this emotional wound and the fear it causes, how it's holding them back, how it's stymieing them in some way, maybe eroding their trust in other people, or, you know, causing them to behave in certain ways. Understanding what that is going to help us set the entire trajectory of our story and our character arc. Because our characters, if they're on the path of change, and most protagonists will be, they want something that's impossible to get at the start of the story. And in order for them to get it, they need to grow and change and evolve and become someone stronger. And the only way they can do that is by facing the thing holding them back, which is their fear and this emotional wounding event that they've never gotten past, that they've never worked through in a healthy way. And until they do that, they will never be able to get to that growth point where they can face the obstacles ahead and get their goal. So understanding the importance of the emotional wound, it helps you plan your entire character arc if you're working with a change arc or even a failed arc, because a failed arc is just the opposite. Your character tries to grow and change and evolve, but their fear holds them back. Their fear is like a prison, and they just can't make that change. And so they revert to who they were, and therefore they fail to achieve their goal.
Okay. That's awesome. So could we
Beautifully explained.
Yeah. Can we think of an example, just to, if people are struggling with the kind of, sorry to put you on the spot, I can help. We can all help.
It's all good.
But it's like, I'm just sort of thinking, and if we could maybe think of it in terms of maybe the romance genre, seeing that's a lot of what our listeners are. Like, I guess in terms of that, maybe a lot of romance would be the goal is to, the goal that you talk about, does it have to be like an overt goal that they know in their head, or is it like when I'm thinking of romance, I'm thinking, is their goal to fall in love, or that often the characters don't want to fall in love, often their emotional wound is stopping them falling in love. So how does that work? Is that,
well, a lot of times your character has a false goal, like they believe I'm strong and independent, and I'm going to show people, and I don't need a relationship, because they've been hurt, they were dumped, or they were betrayed, someone betrayed their trust, and so they have it in their head, my life is better without that, my life is better alone. And this is a lesson that they need to learn, that life is not better alone, that they are unhappy, they are missing that vital human need of love and belonging. There's a hole in their life, and they may resist getting into another relationship again because of everything that they dealt with. Like, let's say there was infidelity, and they discovered that their partner was cheating on them. I mean, that erodes trust on so many levels, because with a wound that has to do with betrayal and trust, those ones are some of the hardest ones to get over, because psychologically speaking, us or the character let this person into their lives. They believed that they were someone that they could trust. They believed that they were someone worthy of being vulnerable and exposed and showing their true self. And then they discovered they were wrong because this person hurt them. And so that kind of hurt is a really difficult one to move past. And it is going to cause your character to try to hold everything back, keep people from getting close, because they don't want to be hurt again. But eventually they need to realize that their life is not satisfying with that missing human need, that something is not making them happy. And it's that goal that comes along where they meet somebody. Maybe they're not even thinking about a romance, but they just meet someone that, like, wow, okay, like, he's a decent guy. And, like, he's into animal rescue and I'm into animal rescue, and he seems like a really good guy, but I don't want to get too close. Like, I don't want to let him in. He could be someone that I'm not, he could be someone else, just like the last time. And so there's that kind of situation where your character, they can see that there's something that they could get from this person that's going to help with that feeling of feeling complete, but they're scared of it as well. And so the role of the emotional wound is to cause our characters to have an epiphany where they realize they want something badly enough that they need to re-examine the thing that happened to them and re-examine it and realize, you know what, just because this one guy betrayed me and, you know, slept with someone else doesn't mean that every guy out there is bad. It doesn't mean that every relationship is going to end that way. And so your character, almost with the emotional wound, they have to reframe it in their mind and reframe it in a way where it was an event that happened, but it doesn't need to paint the entire future that will keep happening to me. And so that's kind of the role with the emotional wound that we want our characters to get to, is to have that realization and understand that they are doing things that keep pushing this guy away. And that works against the thing that they want, which is this closer relationship. So it forces them to sort of, you know, look at themselves and think, you know, okay, I keep lying about how I feel, or every time, you know, he tries to get close and he asks me questions, it's my instinct to push away. I need to stop doing that. So whatever it is that your character's doing in order to keep situations and people at a distance under control, which is what they try to do with the emotional shielding, they need to sort of break that down and realize that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to trust in a safe way, and take those steps so that they can, you know, make that relationship work and make that goal work. I don't know if that answered your question exactly. I kind of like,
I was too busy taking notes.
Yeah, me too. I'm busy writing down. Really, you're muted, babe.
Sorry, I was muting because it was very heavy rain. So with that was brilliant, by the way, also from me.
It was really good.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about it, but the idea, so if you've got this character who's had a previous partner cheat on her or whatever, not only does it give her this emotional wound, but it also it's how she acts, and it colors her perception of the world. So as you're writing, she sees things a certain way and she acts a certain way with any, you know, so new potential partner she meets, like you say, she might push them away, and so it kind of helps you move the plot along, move the story along, move, you know, and the guy that manages to get through that shield, get through that buffer that she's put there, has to do something different, or has to do something that convinces her to let him, you know, like, so that whole, that becomes the plot, the story. That's, to me, that's everything of, like, you know, once you've got the emotional wound and you understand the perception of the character and how they see the world and the kind of actions that they'll take, then you kind of know almost what obstacles you're going to put in their way or what conflicts you're going to bring up, you know. So
especially with relationship conflict, because it's all about understanding, you know, how is this character, like, what is their armor? How do they have their shield up with other people? And exactly why. And when you understand why, how they were hurt, that's where you can create cracks. Right. So in this case, you know, think about how the character was hurt. Like maybe, you know, the character was, or the guy was always very secretive. Like, I've got work, you know, I'm late tonight, this, that, the other thing, and was never quite transparent about where they were. They wouldn't return phone calls. They were not reachable. And yet this new guy that she meets is the complete opposite. Like, oh yeah, this is where I am. Like, you know, we'll do like FaceTimes, like to show, like, not knowing that the person, the protagonist or love interest, whatever the dynamic is there, not knowing that she's been hurt in a very specific way, but just naturally being transparent about this stuff in a way where she's just like, whoa, not all guys are like that. This was just this one guy. And those cracks can be the things that give her the opportunity to re-examine her emotional wound and reframe it so that it's not continuing to steer her away from filling that need that she really needs.
But before she gets to that epiphany that all is right with the world, then maybe one day he is unreachable. And so that sends her back into this fear that, oh my gosh, he actually, underneath it all, he is really like that.
Yeah.
So
there's going to be setbacks.
And then it turns out he was rescuing puppies, and she has to feel bad
there you
about
go.
that.
It's like we're writing the book right now.
Yeah, exactly.
So how does it work? So in terms of emotional wounds, so you've got the woman has the betrayal and the thing in her background. Do we need to have an emotional wound for the other characters? Like say if it's a hero and a heroine, do we have to get the hero's emotional wound? How important is that, do you think? And how does that work?
I think it depends on how important the character is, right? So if we were writing a romance, yeah, you definitely want an emotional wound for the love interest and the protagonist, because in some way they need to be each other's missing piece, right? So her emotional wound is that, you know, infidelity, and she was betrayed, and maybe his is something else. Maybe his is something where, I don't know, maybe growing up, he failed to save his sister's life or something like that. Like they were playing outside and she was up on the jungle gym or something like that, and he was babysitting and she slipped and fell and she broke her neck. It was a total freak accident. But in his mind, even though maybe he was only like 10 years old when it happened, he deep down believes it was his fault. Like if he would have been closer, if he would have done this, if he would have told her not to play there, like if he had done something different, the outcome would have been different. And so he's always kind of feared losing people. So maybe in his case, that's kind of why he is pushing away this relationship, is he feels like, if I let her in, what if something happens to her? What if she leaves me? Or what if I fail to protect her when it's really necessary? So that could be like his emotional wound. And in some way, like, he needs to see that what happened, you know, it was an awful, terrible event, but it was not his fault. And that could even be why he's into animal rescue work, by the way. This is where you can pull in their occupation. Like, this is where you start going with how I said show, don't tell, and these details all weave together. Maybe he chose rescue work because he's trying to make up for this past mistake where he failed to rescue his sister. And so he rescues animals. He does everything that he can, trying to make up for this mistake that isn't even a mistake. And that's the beautiful thing, is that the reader, they see everything. And so they can see how our characters are skewing what happened. You know, they can see that, you know what, this guy, like, he was 10, like, he could not have saved his sister. That was a terrible event. And he needs to stop blaming himself. And that becomes so satisfying for the reader when he has that epiphany and realizes, you know, like, that was awful, but, you know, I was a kid. He needs to have that epiphany too. So if you can come up with emotional wounds where the other person is like the missing piece that's going to help them move forward and become someone complete, that's where you get total magic when it comes to relationships, and especially romance.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I think that's very true. Like the ones where they somehow help each other to see, or I don't want to say fix their wound, but like kind of show that their wound isn't, or their fear,
help mend it.
Yeah, help mend it somehow. That's the other awesome books. Do you know one? And I literally only watched it night before, is Hitch with Will Smith. It's a movie. And I think in that one they both have these great wounds from the past, that she's like can't trust men because they always kind of
was that down. Mendes?
Yeah, and then his was, he was a really dorky kid into his college years, and he fell in love, but he went too far and he kind of pushed her away by being overeager, and so he pulls right back and he's completely walled behind it. And so, but you watch it's almost like a classic it's, if you're wanting to watch a story that has the classic kind of romance plot line, that's one of them, and it kind of shows really clearly what you're talking about. I think like the wounds are really clear, and that's very
I think listening to Angela talk as well, sorry, Shah, is the fact that my mind immediately made up a story for both of those people. Like, I already knew that, you know, his parents had actually enforced that belief that it was his fault, you know, and he's unworthy and all this sort of thing. And that, you know, somehow she's got to, you know, make him feel worthy, or he needs to feel worthy by helping her. I don't know. It's like, wow. I mean, that's just a snippet of what your books do, right, Angela? They just open up that access to more feelings and more depth, I think, of character.
Definitely.
Well, and too, like, it also creates the connection with the reader, because we've all been wounded. We've all had things that have happened to us. We blame ourselves for things that have happened that are illogical. You know, like I said, there's self-blame is something that is really tied to a lot of emotional wounds, because psychologically speaking, we're very hardwired into controlling our lives the best we can. I mean, that's why we put gas in our car so that we get to work on time. That's why we lock our doors so that we're safe. That's why we pick a neighborhood with a good school so that our kids will have a good education. We are always trying to figure out how to control our reality. And emotionally wounding events are moments where we realize there is no control. You know, if someone that we love is murdered or taken too soon in a different way, they get an illness, or something happens to a child where they just are growing up in an abusive situation, like those are things that are not within control. And I think that every reader has those moments, those things that have happened. And so connecting to characters that are struggling to reconcile these false beliefs that they have inside their head, these false ideas that somehow they're to blame, or they screwed up, or, you know, they deserved what happened, or, you know, whatever is going on, that, you know, helps them reconcile, why did this happen to me? Like, why me? Maybe I should have done this instead. I think if a reader can kind of relate to that. And I think it's a really good point of connection. I think emotional wounds too are especially helpful to romance writers, because it is a great way to create a fresh story every time. Whatever your character's emotional wounds are, like, as you guys, you know, the whatever I was saying was probably completely different than the story that Cheryl had going on in her head, right? And that's the thing, is that we can take different wounds and we can build these really unique premises from them.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because like how Cheryl was thinking about the parents being mean to I was thinking, oh, well, he's probably really overprotective because he's trying to protect everyone all the time, and he's probably, maybe that's why he likes the you know, he gets past the girl's defenses, because he's just constantly trying to protect her, or, you know, and she sees that he's around and he can be relied on, and like that's where I was going with it. Like, it was sort of my so anyway, so I just wanted to did I talk through the picture, the page of the Emotional Thesaurus? I can't remember if I did or not.
Map, really, I guess, in terms of applying this. And I think it can be, as a chronic overthinker, having a start, like looking at the emotional wound, just kind of gives me a target to go for. You know, it kind of stops the
pick something, and then you can build on it.
Absolutely. And you know, exactly what you said, we can all come up with an infinite number of examples of that one thing, and I guarantee that you could even, if Angela was to give us, you know, this wound for this character, this wound for that character, we would come up with completely different stories, no matter how specific the wound was. So no, it's awesome.
Oh, so, Trudi's back.
Trudi's back.
Sorry, I must have, my internet connection was unstable, apparently.
You froze at a good time. Like, it wasn't like, you know,
it's like
derpy or anything like that.
No. We mocked you a little, but it's okay.
Okay, awesome. As long as you mocked me, I mean, that's the important thing.
A little bit, just a little bit.
Yeah.
That's our job.
One question I have is, so we get you know, I've read all the books about story and craft and stuff, and one that I've read was talking about like an emotional wound needed to be something from childhood. Do you think that's necessarily the case, or is it just a wound of some kind, out of curiosity?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to remember is that we as people and our characters are going to have lots of different emotional wounds. There's going to be lots of things that happen, lots of upsets that happen throughout life. People will hurt us, things will hurt us. And yes, a lot of those things start in childhood. But when it comes to the story, I think what we want to do is think about the emotional wound that's going to have the most impact on the story and be the thing that they need to work past in the scope of this story in order to achieve their goal. So in some ways, yes, I mean, all those original hurts are going to happen in childhood, because childhood wounds are some of, you know, I talked about the relationship ones, the betrayals and misplaced trust, like those are some of the most difficult to get past. Childhood wounds are as well, because childhood wounds as children, our characters and us, we don't have the experience with emotions to know that we need to raise our shields and protect ourselves. So, we're open vessels and stuff happens and people hurt us and it's just like it hits us full on. And that's what happens when you're a kid, is you don't have those emotional tool sets to protect yourself from being hurt. It just happens. And so in some ways, yes, like, the building blocks for later emotional wounds may happen in childhood. But what we want to be thinking about in terms of the story is, what is the emotional wound we want to deal with in this story? And what's most important? We all have a lot of trauma. There's going to be lots of different things that we deal with, our reader's going to deal with, and our characters are going to deal with. But what's the primary wound? What's the one thing that's almost like at the root of everything else, at the root of all the things, all the ways where our characters getting in their own way from being successful or getting the thing that they want or whatever? What's the one thing that is like, really they need to deal with? And if we can answer that question, that can be kind of the focus of our story.
Yeah. And I think if you get something from a childhood, so you something happens and you decide that people can't be trusted or something, then it's almost like that's your story. So then as you get older and older, every time you go into a situation, you'll be like, well, people can't be trusted. So, and you'll find examples of people not being trustworthy, kind of thing. So sort of, so it's almost like, and then once your story starts at the place at which they start, like you said before, knowing the emotional wound, well, if it's that people can't be trusted, it's almost like the arc is to try and find people for them to trust, like it's but it's something that's
the character's worldview, right? Like how do they view the world? And if they view the world as people are inherently untrustworthy, then that's when they interact with people, when they have relationships, it'll be transactional. It'll be like looking for hidden motivations and things like that. Okay, you said that, but is that really what you think? And they're always going to be looking for why they shouldn't trust what that person says or why they shouldn't take it at face value. And you're right, they're going to read into stuff and they're going to specifically, it's like confirmation bias, right? Where you're looking for something and eventually you'll find it. Eventually you'll find that evidence that supports the thing that you believe.
Just reaffirming it everywhere you look.
And I also would like to point out too that the vast majority of us and characters don't realize what these wounds are. Like they're unconscious. We're unconsciously operating, unless you've been in 15 million years of therapy. The characters, they don't necessarily know that, because my sister died, and I'm carrying this kind of long-lasting guilt or, fear. So they can have the moment of actualization, that's why I think, but I guess what I'm trying to say is you don't have to give them an unpeeling of the psychological onion completely. It's just an acknowledgement, maybe, that, it feels good to trust somebody. I mean, what's the universal truth when something hurts us? We want to get over it as fast as possible because it hurts, it emotionally hurts us. So we want to get past this uncomfortable moment as soon as possible. And often that means taking that pain, shoving it in a suitcase and putting it under the bed and pretending it doesn't exist and that we're totally fine. But the thing is we're not fine and our characters won't be fine. And they are going to be on the lookout for being hurt in that way again. That's the big thing with emotional wounds, is however your character was hurt, there is going to be a fear that they will be emotionally hurt in the same way again. If your character was carjacked, that's going to be an awful moment. They're going to have to deal with the aftermath of that. And then moving forward, they're going to be like, that's never going to happen to me again. You know what? I'm not going to drive anymore. Not going to do that. My teenage daughter, you're not driving either. And they're going to try to control their life in a way that's going to protect this thing. But that decision is going to make them unhappy because maybe they were people that, they love to travel. They love to go on road trips. Maybe their teenage daughter is like not happy about not being allowed to drive. And that's going to create friction in that relationship. And eventually what happens is problems, friction. What's going on? Why am I so unhappy? And it forces them to examine and self-assess and go, why doesn't she understand that I'm trying to do this to protect her? I know there's bad people out there. And it becomes this point in time where they need to have this epiphany that, it all comes down to this thing that happened to them. And if they want to heal that relationship with their daughter,
They need to realize, okay, I need to empower her with safe protocols with driving. You know, what happened to me? Maybe someone waved me over and I rolled down my window, and then that, you know, they pretended that they had a breakdown and I stopped. And so instead of me saying, no, you can never drive a car, that's not realistic, I need to communicate like, okay, these are situations you need to be safe in. And if something like that happens, go and let the next gas station know that there's somebody back there that needs help. Don't stop. Don't do those things. And so they need to examine like how their own behavior is causing problems for them in their lives. And that can be like the gateway to changing and to not letting that event control them. And sometimes that's exactly what needs to happen.
Yeah. And that's where the thesaurus comes in that you can look and say, okay, I don't know, does it say carjacking in here? I can't even.
There is actually carjacking isn't there, because that's an example I use in one of my workshops.
Yeah. So you go to the page and go, okay, carjacking. I'm going to look it up. Can I find it here? I don't know. And on the say on the carjacking page, there'll be examples of how you could okay, well, I've got accidentally killing someone, so I'm going to go with that one because I can't find carjacking in this minute. And it's all the ways that you could potentially accidentally kill someone, and it's the basic needs compromised by that, the false beliefs that could be embraced, and there's lists of these. So it's not that I'm like, okay, right, so I need them to be feeling bad as a character, and I think they're going to accidentally kill someone, and then I go here and I go, oh, it could have been a jet ski accident, and I think they're going to fear responsibility in making decisions from now on, you know, like there's all these different, and then it's responses and results, personality traits that may form, so you can kind of go, so it's just helping you plot out your story and that character's fears that we've been talking about from that, and it triggers that may aggravate the wound. I love that one. It's kind of like, oh gosh, they could have something else, like that's the thing that's going to happen in the story that's going to trigger this past fear.
Well, they've got their stuff packed in the suitcase under the bed, and as writers we need to pull that suitcase out. And so triggers is a great way to do that. Put them in a situation where maybe they've been fearing, you know, maybe they were driving a jet ski, so you know what, I'm not going to be responsible anymore. I'm not going to be the designated driver. I'm not going to volunteer for stuff. No way. Because the last time I did that, something bad happened. So we put them in a situation where that is triggered. And guess what? There's nobody else to take charge. They have to do it. They have to step into that role. And it's moments like that that help them move past this fear that if they are in charge, if they are responsible, something bad is going to happen and they're going to, you know, screw it up.
Yeah.
But we're talking about, so we've been talking a lot about, you know, having this sort of as part of the plotting process, but it's also can be part of the revision process as well, kind of, if you've got a character and they're feeling a little flat, or you've maybe had a little bit of feedback from a critique partner saying, I don't quite understand why did they do that? You know, this can give context, can't it, to a character's actions or thoughts?
I think so. And I think especially for pantsers, right? Like pantsers don't like to figure out all this stuff at the start. They like to just go with a couple ideas that they have with a character and write and see where it goes. And usually by the end of the story, like, you know, it's like, whoa, oh my God, you know, they've got this whole idea for this character. And then they have to kind of almost work backwards. Okay, so this was what he was struggling with. And like, this is what he learned. So why was he struggling with this? What caused like this fear? What caused this, like where he kept behaving in a certain way and it kept getting him in trouble, and it kept getting, like, what caused him to do that? What caused him to think, I have to do this? Because that dysfunctional behavior, that flawed behavior is a big part of emotional wounds. You know, there's going to be a stumbling block that's going to trip our characters up. And they do it because that flawed behavior is part of the thing that makes them believe that they will be safe. You know, if I don't ever let anyone get close to me, nobody's going to ever hurt me. And so I'm going to keep pushing people away. I'm going to keep doing things that is, you know, going to make me unlikable or make me not trustworthy or something like that. So if our character thinks that, at a certain point in time, they have to realize, wait, this is not helping me in this situation. Like, I really like this person. And so if I keep doing things that make me seem untrustworthy, like, I'm going to lose that relationship. So they have to want something that makes them kind of realize, what I'm doing, this is dysfunctional. I need to do something different. And it creates that epiphany that flawed behavior, those negative traits that they may have, are things that they need to let go of in order to get the thing that they want.
Yeah. And do you think side characters are part of how they learn all of that? Like if you've got this emotional wound where you want to seem, or you don't want to be trusted, or you don't want to be in a position of responsibility, so you try to be untrustworthy, or like you become a slacker, you become someone who can't be trusted, irresponsible, and you've got a best friend who is completely irresponsible, and they're the one that and then you've got the interaction between these two irresponsible characters, and then they hit something where they have to become responsible, whatever. I don't know, but
yeah, you're totally on the right track. Like, I mean, this is where you get into foil characters, someone who's like, the opposite of your character in some way, so maybe our character is completely irresponsible and they're constantly, trying to slack off, and, they have their reasons, but maybe other people don't even know why. And the best friend is someone that's responsible, does what he says he's going to do, follows through. And guess what? Good things happen for him. He doesn't have problems like our character does. It's like this lesson of like, wait a minute, like he's not having problems that I'm having. Why am I having problems? Oh, right. It can be that, or it can be that where they are the same. And it's almost like this toxic sort of thing where they feed off of each other. And at a certain point in time, like your character realizes, you know what, this isn't enough anymore. Like, I don't like where this is going, and I need something different. I think that's something that a lot of people realize. I know, like, as kids, sometimes, like, some kids, like, they just seem to know, yep, college, university, doing this, doing that. They got a plan. And then others are kind of like, I don't know what I want to do. I think I'll like work here for a bit and just kind of party and whatever. But almost every kid at a certain point in time, they kind of have this moment where they realize, I want something more than this. And that's where they start making a plan. And I know that was me growing up. I saw that with my kids. I've seen that with a lot of kids, that you don't really know what you want to do. And you get pulled into a certain group of friends or a certain thing. And then you just realize that you want something more. And that's our characters. They have to realize they want something more, and then put in the effort to make the changes to get that thing. Yeah.
And that's almost an explanation as well for maybe an unlikable character. Like if you've got, so for in romance, you get these kind of alpha holes, they call them, but these alpha heroes, or another one is a book called Slouch Witch. I'm pretty sure that's the name of it, by Helen Harper, and it's the main character. She's this witch, but she's just she can't be bothered kind of witch, and she doesn't really try, and she doesn't do anything properly, and then you learn that there's this wound in her background where someone hurt her, and then as soon as you realize actually she's a really, really good witch. She's just pretending to be a bad, you know what I mean? Like there's and that kind of thing comes in as well. Then you can kind of, and we all kind of love an alpha hole who has a backstory where he got hurt, and that's why he, all those kinds of things. Is that the only way to use that, or like, can you have characters that seem really lovely and they've got a terrible emotional wound, or do you kind of have to have this kind of negative?
No, I think it can be both. I mean, you might have someone that they try to do everything perfectly because they grew up in a family there was conditional love. Mom and dad only loved them when they succeeded, when they did good, and they were constantly, like, oh, well, your brother, had no problem with this. Your brother did this. Your brother got this. And so that turns them into someone that they believe that they have to do the best that they can all the time. And they put the needs of other people first. They're always trying to please someone else. So it can look positive, but deep down, there's something dysfunctional about that. Because if your character is the kind of person where they put other people first all the time, then where's room for them? When do they put themselves first? Are they even happy doing the job that they're doing, or are they just doing it to impress mom and dad? So you can have this go in both directions. I mean, any positive trait taken too far can be a negative. And negative traits can have positive outcomes and positive aspects of them, right? So we need to think about that spectrum. And we just need to understand what's the why behind my character's behavior. I mean, maybe our characters they've moved past the biggest wound. but there's always going to be more emotional baggage to work through, right? Other things that they need to work through. And this can be actually really helpful if you're working through a series, right? You can't have your character in book one, like, okay, I'm fixed. And then book two, what happens? Like, there needs to be more, like there needs to be more work that needs to be done within. There needs to be other ways that they're being held back in a different way. There's new challenges, you know, and that's life. Like, that's the most beautiful thing I think about character arc, is that it mimics the real world. You know, we don't just go through life, figure some things out, get the thing we want, and yay, happy. I mean, I wish, but there's always like, there's stepping stones, there's setbacks, there's things that happen. Our goals change. There's certain new needs that we have that we didn't have before. And it's always like this constant learning journey about who we are, what we're capable of, you know, why are we afraid of certain things? How are those things holding us back? You know, how can we move past those things? And so characters and character arc is this way to kind of have our readers be reminded of their own journeys and things that maybe they're struggling with and why. So I think like that's one of the most powerful parallels that we can create in our story, is to create moments in the story, maybe with our characters, you know, a wound that is tied to a failure or a mistake they had. They tried to save someone's life and they failed. You know, failure and mistakes are two things that we've all done. And so it is an immediate recognition that your reader will have, is that the character failed. They know what that feels like. They know how awful it is, you know?
Yeah.
So it's great to create those binds.
And it's all about that connecting with readers. At the end of the day, the whole purpose of this is about just creating that kind of almost psychic connection with the reader.
I'm glad you said that about series, because that's something I find really hard, is actually like, I just want to fix everything in the first book, and then you get to the second book and you're like, oh wait, I need another, oh god, more, and I've got a series with 5 books in it, and I'm like, oh, 5, what was I thinking? Like,
my character's got to be really messed up,
you
know. But you know, it's just, think about yourself. You know, we all have different experiences in our past, and they've shaped us and made us who we are, in good ways and bad. And your character will have different things, different facets, experiences that create challenges, blind spots, where they don't even realize at first that something's a problem until it is, because now they've run into this new problem, and now they have to examine, why do I behave that way when she says that? Why do I get so defensive when, you know, I'm competing with someone? Like, why? And it's that exploration that, you know, can work for that second book. Maybe it's where you go deeper into those childhood wounds, you know, you work backwards. So it's, I think there's lots of opportunity.
I think it's definitely something you want to think about in the first book, like that maybe there's going to be a really deep emotional wound that is going to be across several books. And maybe there's a lighter version of that, or something sitting on top, like layers of an onion or something, that you can fix. I just like to fix things for my characters in the first book, and then it becomes something else, or a slightly deeper level in the next books or something. Is that a fair thought?
Like, it's like a facet. You do a facet in each book. I mean, the best thing to do is just look at series that you love and think about the characters and how they evolved over the course of that series. You know, what did they learn? How did they change? What were they challenged with? And how was each goal a real challenge? Not just like outer plot events that stood in their way, but internally, what did they wrestle with? You know, what did they have to reconcile? Like, your character may have an emotional wound in one area, dealing with the relationships, and then in the next book, it's something that kind of makes them question their belief system, their morals. It attacks their morals in some way, and so they need to think about, like, why do I have this bias against this person? Like, why am I, you know, why is my first reaction to like reject this, you know, because of this bias? And then diving into why, where did that bias form? You know, that's a byproduct of emotional wounding events, is that it can leave us with biases. If you have a character who is homeless and they were robbed and they call the police, and the police come, and the police are really dismissive, and they're like, well, you know, you're homeless, so you're going to be around this kind of neighborhood, this is going to happen, sorry. Like, completely uncaring. Moving forward, that character's not going to be like, oh, well, I can still trust the police. I'll call the police the next time I have a problem. No, like they're going to feel like police only care about you if you are a certain level of income, or you live in a certain, if you're a certain level of society. Like they don't care about people like me. And so they're going to have these beliefs, you know, and every time they see a police officer moving forward, they're not going to think, oh, well, this is someone new that I can trust and talk to. They're just going to be reminded of that last interaction that they had. So that's how biases form, is negative events that happen that cause us and our characters to sort of paint the world with the same brush, you know, that all people are like this, you know, all men cheat, or whatever that looks like.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Oh my gosh.
I love psychology. I'm like such a nerd for it. Can you
I was going to say that because you said psychologically speaking a couple of times, and I wondered how have you studied psychology, or have you had to in the course of these books? Or
study it 100%, but I mean not professionally. Like that's the thing with Becca and I, is what drives us with characters is understanding, you know, how can we bring the real world into the fictional world? How can we make our characters think and act and breathe just like real people? How can we do that? And that means understanding psychology and how psychology impacts us, and why do people do the things that they do, and how can we do that for characters? So we've studied this a lot, but we are not professionals. We don't have professional education. For some of the books that we've written, including the Emotional Thesaurus, we actually had everything vetted by a psychologist, because it's one thing for us to study. And this particular book, it was hard to write because we were researching real world trauma. Every single trauma in here, somebody's experienced in the world, which is awful. And that was the hardest thing about this book, is seeing that there are truly infinite ways that people hurt each other. But still, we wanted to create something that would be helpful for writers. And so we dove into those traumas, and we understood how people felt and how it led to destructive behaviors and, you know, different things that are tied to each emotional wound. But even us doing like that study, there's still things that we don't know because we don't have that professional accreditation. And we haven't done that, you know, the higher education that we would need. Simple things, like sometimes we would frame something like, we would talk about someone who suffered a form of abuse and called them a victim. You never want to call them a victim. You want to call them a survivor. And this is something where, you know, as soon as she said it, it's like, of course, because a reader doesn't want to think about themselves as a victim if they have something in common with that character. They survived something, right? So it's sometimes it's about the language choices that we use are really important, especially when it comes to psychology, especially when it comes to like all this emotional stuff under the surface. So having someone like vet everything and make sure we got the details right was really important, especially for this particular book. We also did that with personality traits too, because personality traits and emotional wounds are very closely tied together. So especially flawed behavior, like negative traits. So that's some instances where we needed some extra help.
Yeah. I'm just trying to find my personality traits book. I just want to see it.
Green and purple. See, that's like, just tell them the color, Angela. Tell them the color.
Purple, positive and negative trait thesaurus. I see. Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah, we're running out of colors, by the way.
I was going to say, how many more colored books are we going to have? Have you got any more in the pipeline? Have you got any more in the planner, or percolating ideas?
Well, yeah. I mean, one thing about Becca and I is that like we put a lot of work into each book that we write. And so while we have 9 like print books, and then there's like an e-booklet called Emotion Amplifiers, which is the 10th one, we have actually written many more thesauruses, one on character motivation, which is super helpful for plotting, understanding like inner motivation, outer motivation, stakes, you know, obstacles, all that kind of stuff. We've done one on character relationships, which is another one we're really excited about that we, you know, need to turn into a book. Character fears, like talking about all these, the fear that comes about when your character has an emotionally wounding event and their fear that thing could happen again. We explore those type of fears, like the deep level fears, not the like I'm scared of spiders, but like fear of failure and you know, those kind of deep level fears that our characters can have. So we have a lot of different thesauruses that we've created, and they're actually, most of them are at One Stop for Writers, which is kind of it's where we keep all of these databases together because like, as you see, like there's a lot of different books, and sometimes, writers want to interconnect much better because so many of these topics are tied to our characters in some way, shape, or form. And so being able to go from thesaurus to thesaurus to understand how my character, who, his sister died under his care, now has an occupation as a animal rescue worker, you want to go right to that occupation. Okay, so what does that look like? What did they do? What did they experience? And so, you want to be able to kind of go from one topic to the next. And so that's one thing that we do at One Stop for Writers.
Nice.
So to scale back to the part of the question that you were asking, what's next? We're taking Emotion Amplifiers, which is it's a little ebook that we created because a lot of people were contacting us with the Emotion Thesaurus saying, hey, you forgot some of these emotions like boredom and exhaustion and things like that. But the thing is those aren't emotions. Those are states of being. Those are things that actually amplify emotions, meaning that when your character's in pain or they're stressed out or they're exhausted, those things are going to cause them to be more emotionally reactive, which is awesome because it creates conflict, which creates tension, and it just does a lot. Our characters screw up, they make mistakes. It's beautiful. We love it. But they're not actually emotions. So we kind of created this little ebook that had like, it's the same format as the Emotion Thesaurus, like the things that your character will experience when they're exhausted, what their thought processes are, the visceral sensations that go with it, so that they can write that, but understand that it's not an emotion. So we're going to broaden this out and look at a lot of different states and things that can happen that will cause our characters to be more emotionally reactive. And that's the next book that we're doing, and it should be out sometime this spring. That's kind of our
Fantastic. Well, as much as I could keep talking to you for another hour or so, we have reached the end of our time together for the podcast interview. So where can you be found, Angela? Where's the best place for people to get in contact with you? Or
Well, I am online everywhere because I'm social. So you can Google Angela Ackerman, Facebook, wherever you'll find me. But I have two main websites, Writers Helping Writers, which Becca and I run together. It's kind of like the nerve center where we do all the things to do with our books. And we have a blog there. We have resident writing coaches, different experts that we invite in every year to, write about their perspectives about storycraft. So if you're looking for articles or help on any topic at all, that's a really great place to come. And then we have One Stop for Writers, which is how Becca and I help people beyond our books, where we have created different types of tools that often integrate the source content that we've created to make things easier. So you're able to like plot stories, outlines there. We have something called a character builder tool that it houses all of the thesauruses to do with characters. And you can easily brainstorm your character's backstory, brainstorm their behavior and their emotional range and their occupations and their character arc. It even will recognize the important details as you're planning and create a character arc blueprint for you. So you'll know exactly what your character wants, why, what's standing in their way, what's at stake, all of that kind of stuff. So you can do that with a single tool that we created there.
wow,
That sounds cool.
So those are the two places to find me.
Wonderful. We'll make sure that those links are put in our show notes and also in our comments on Facebook and on the YouTube, on the YouTube description. And we're at spargirlspodcast.com. We're also at patreon.com/spargirlspodcast. If you'd like to join our community, buy us a coffee, maybe a muffin.
Muffins are good.
New. The muffin's new.
Muffin's new.
Awesome. And thank you again, Angela, for joining us for this episode of the Spar Girls podcast. We've loved having you here. It's been awesome. And thank you to all of our listeners for listening and watching another episode of the Spar Girls podcast. We'll see you all again next week for another episode.
Keep well. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.